Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about the iconic 1981 post-apocalyptic action film Mad Max 2, or The Road Warrior, as it was known in the United States. And the film begins with a short introductory sequence outlining a future of escalating resource depletion leading to a fearsome international conflict, and eventually the collapse of society into lawless wastelands. Sometime after this long but thorough calamity, we find ourselves in the Australian desert, where bandits in bondage gear pursue Max, our leather-clad hero, in inverted commas, down the highway. A mixture of driving skill and guile allows Max to survive, though two of the bandits also escape with their lives. Those guys are going to be back. After a subsequent encounter with a gangly, gawky owner of a gyrocopter, played by Bruce Spence, who is the greatest thing in this movie other than the stuntmen, Max learns of a nearby stockade where the inhabitants are still producing gasoline. The only trouble? It's surrounded by a whole horde of those bondage bandits I mentioned earlier, including the ones he's already tangled with. Max is a resourceful guy, though, and he's not about to let a little thing like a whole gang of, lunatic hoodlums stop him. He wants some of the gas these people are making. He's willing to do a more or less honest deal to get it, but he's not interested in risking his neck for any kind of altruistic reasons. Max just wants the fuel, and then he's going to be out of there. Of course, things won't work out anywhere near as smoothly as Max hopes, leading to a series of high-speed car chases and action aplenty. So the original Mad Max, released in 1979, was made on a tiny budget, but went on to be a major international success, which meant two things about the sequel. First, that writer-director George Miller would have a significantly more generous budget to work with, and second, that if he blew it, everybody was going to know. I'm glad to say he didn't blow it. Mad Max 2 is, in my opinion, in every way a superior offering to its predecessor. It has more interesting characters, more dynamic action and costuming, and it told a new but obviously connected story, a feat that Miller achieved by moving things forward in the timeline of his fictional world. Whereas the original movie showed a society undergoing a slow decline towards lawlessness, the second is firmly post-apocalyptic. Resource scarcity led to a ferocious, though largely conventional war that caused ever greater resource scarcity until all the cities went dark and a reign of violence began. And that leads us into the first aspect of the film that I wanted to discuss. The film's backstory of slow decline of civilization directly fed into its aesthetics, a style that might be called junk tech, where everyday items of the modern world are repeatedly seen to have been jury-rigged into serving another purpose. A stop sign crudely shaped into a piece of armour, a piece of rebar sharpened into a blade, and so forth. These design elements have more or less gone on to define the typical depiction of post-apocalyptic futures and have been co-opted by dozens of other films and computer games and tabletop role-playing games. Take the black leathers, biker gear, and bondage aesthetics of Humongous' gang. Humongous is the main villain. If you've ever played a modern Fallout game, you've no doubt fought rangers who look a lot like they came straight off the set of this film. The movie's arid wasteland vistas across which charge snarling muscle cars and spike-laden dune buggies have also become a feature of other post-apocalyptic fare. Now, while I suspect these later offerings included such scenes because of the success of this movie, and they were just basically copying it, I think that their inclusion here was very deliberate and purposeful. It seems likely to me that a filmmaker as smart as George Miller recognised that chase scenes are visually dynamic while also being conceptually simple narrative structures, where the stakes are easy for the audience to grasp. That helps the audience digest the other story elements and world-building lore that he has to impart, because they're not having to focus too much on the plot. He can get this other stuff in around the sides as the characters charge around doing their high-octane action. And the chase scenes are certainly a major feature of the film. The movie is very much structured around a number of chase scene set pieces. It begins with Max being chased, then closes the first act on his risky attempt to break through the bandit blockade. Much of the second act revolves around the desperate attempt to recover the abandoned lorry cab Max saw at the outset of the film, while the entire climax is one long, high-speed battle as Humongous and his goons swarm around the now armoured lorry and its handful of defenders. Now, of course, lots of movies have lots of chase scenes. Jerry Bruckheimer's The Island is pretty much nothing but chase scenes, and Miller's own Mad Max Fury Road also fits into the same mould. The difference between the two Miller films and Bruckheimer's movie, though, are that Miller really understands how to structure action in much more varied ways, giving each subset of the movie its own narrative purpose and identity. This film may be wall-to-wall chase scenes, but they are expertly crafted, distinctive, purposeful chase scenes. Few other directors are as skilled as Miller at visual storytelling, and this is one of the movies that really demonstrates that fact. Now, all this prayed aside, Mad Max 2 is not a flawless movie in the script department. For instance, given that we're in the desert and we see Max eating dog food to survive, it's a little odd that thereafter the subject of food and water never really come up. I would have expected how do we actually eat and drink to be a much more urgent need than gasoline. I mean, even now, without an apocalypse, a large community of people in the Australian outback are going to need a source of food and water much more desperately than they need a source of gasoline. Now, maybe the Stockade has a well for fresh water, but doesn't look anywhere near large enough an area to provide food for its inhabitants, especially in such an otherwise lifeless environment. Second, given that fuel is the subject of all this conflict, it's conspicuous how profligate everyone is in its use. The Great Humongous sends his men roaring around the stockade on a regular basis, which accomplishes very little and consumes the very thing he's allegedly so eager to acquire. Fortunately, it's generally fairly easy to overlook these flaws and just enjoy the dynamic action sequences and the colourful characters. These are definitely the strengths of the film, and it commits to them full throttle. Next time, something a little bit different. For these videos, I'm going to take a look at a new release movie that I recently saw in theatres. Sony's much maligned Spider-Man adjacent superhero film, Madame Web. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've seen today's movie, let me know what you thought of it.